All right, hello. Welcome to our webinar today. We're going to give everyone a couple minutes to get signed in here. This is a global webinar. We have a global team actually supporting this call. I'm based in Sunnyvale. Lawrence, my colleague as well in support, is in Sunnyvale, and we have a couple of my esteemed colleagues in Atlanta. And we'll give everyone a couple minutes here before we get started. Thanks for joining us and signing up for this amazing webinar. It's actually a four-part webinar. This is the second part. Last 2 weeks ago, we covered the Artifactory section of this. This is going to be more focused on the security part of our product. So we're really excited to have you guys on this call today. Pretty good list of attendees here. So keep on rolling in here. We're going to give everyone about another minute or so before we get started. Thanks for enrolling for the webinar, and anyone that signed up should have gotten an email yesterday with an environment. We'll be using that in this class today. Excellent. And give everyone a little bit more time. Thanks for joining this awesome webinar. We're going to run about 90 minutes for this webinar, so get comfortable, get some water. You need to use a bio break right now. This is a good time to do it. And we'll get started in just a few more seconds here. Excellent. Wow, a lot of people here. So we're really super excited to have you guys join us. All right. I think this is probably a good time to get started. We want to make sure we're able to cover all the material. Thanks for joining us today. This is part 2 of 4 of a exciting virtual workshop series that we're running at JFrog called DevNext. If you'd like to share the screen, Roshan, we can get started. And I'll do a quick round of introductions here. And just go full screen on that. Perfect. All right, everyone should be able to see this now. So great. So we're going to get started now. This is workshop 2. Our series today is focused on security. So innovate more, remediate less with our JFrog DevOps-Centric security solutions. So again, this is part of a 4-part series. My name is Richard. I'm going to be your host today. I'm covering for my esteemed colleague and friend, Bill Manning. He's actually in London right now, representing a DevSecOps event. He was the host for our last series, and hopefully he'll be joining us for the next one. I've been with JFrog for close to 5 years. I work in our solution engineering team. I'm one of our managers, and I brought along an amazing cast with me today. We have Roshan and Sam. They're based in Atlanta, really talented individuals. They're working in our senior solutions engineering roles, and we support our customers on a daily basis. These could be new customers or existing customers using our solutions. We help them through our JFrog platform journey to make sure they understand the full benefits of the platform. I've also brought along with me Lawrence. He'll be supporting us on any of the environment issues that you guys might have. Please use the Q&A panel. We also have our chat panel. We can reach out to you directly if there's any issues. And I'll give a quick round of introductions. So if Roshan, if you want to give a quick intro for yourself, and we'll go around the room to Sam and then Lawrence.
Yes. Thanks, Rich. Hey guys, this is Roshan. Thanks for joining, and also thank you for taking a lot of time to be here. We got a lot of great content prepared, and so I'm Roshan. I'm part of the solution engineering team. Almost a little over a year. Joined JFrog and been working in the cloud, containers, and Kubernetes space all along my career, and happy to drive or bring that security aspect to all of those areas as well. And I'll hand it over to Sam.
Sure. Hi, I'm Sam Kasimala. I'm from Solutions Engineering team. It's about 10 years since I joined JFrog in this team, helping our customers with various JFrog products and implementations. Before this, I was with Amazon AWS, insurance company, one of the big 4 companies, one of the biggest steel producer, one of the biggest banks in the US. So I'm glad to be here and help you in today's workshop.
Excellent. And Lawrence, do you want to do a quicker intro?
Great. I'm Lawrence. I work as a support engineer for JFrog. I've been here for almost 4 years. If you ever open a ticket, you may have met me before. Yeah. That's it.
Excellent. All right, thanks guys for the quick intros. If we want to do the next slide. All right, so a couple logistics and housekeeping things here. So those that have enrolled for the webinar, you should have received an email yesterday. That includes an environment that you can use throughout this webinar that we're going to be going through today. We do have a Q&A panel, so this is a great place to ask questions. We'll respond to you throughout the session. I'll be answering those questions in addition to Lawrence. Any relevant links that we think we can share with you that will be relevant to the material, we'll also post there as well in the Q&A and the chat panels. We are recording this session, so you get a copy of it as well. And the environment, our intent is to let you use this environment throughout the course of the year. So trying to extend it into the end of December. So stay tuned on that details. Some of the examples that we'll show you, the environment should be used for that, and you can follow along in these exercises. Again, if you have any problems, and use the panels here to reach out to us, and we'll get back to you with any help that's needed. We will have a brief feedback in the survey at the end. Those that have enrolled eligible for the gift card as well. And again, we'll extend those environments and go through the material now. So I think this is a great time to switch it over now, and I'm going to let Roshan lead the beginning part of our call, and Sam's going to also cover the material, and then we'll wrap up at the end. So hand it over to you, Roshan. Thanks, everyone.
Yep. Awesome. So just before we get started, there are a couple of things I would like to just bring up. This will be helpful for you to actually walk through along as I'm progressing across some of the content, and you'll also get some hands-on experience over here. Firstly is the SaaS instance. If your trial is not available, just feel free to sign up for a new one. It should not take more than like few minutes to get that up and running. I also have a Git repository where it has like a Flask, like a web code Python application that we'll be using for this particular webinar session. I'll just put the link in the chat. So you'll be able to clone this particular Git repository. And also, if you have handy for VS Code or IntelliJ IDE, we'll be also going through some of the capabilities where you'll actually able to run some of your scans right in the IDE itself. And also, if you have a Docker client up and running, we'll be able to actually push some of the Docker images into your the factory instances or the JFrog instance, and have the security aspects to it. If Docker client is not available, feel free to make use of like Podman or any other capabilities. There are certain snippets that will be available in the platform itself that will help you to actually publish an image. When you do sign up, you should be able to see some predefined repositories already in there. We can actually make use of those instead of creating as well. So with that said, and also feel free to post questions. Rich and Lawrence here will be able to assist you with any of the questions. Awesome. So for the agenda of today's workshop, we'll just go through some brief introduction, give the background of why we are here, what are we talking about, and how do we address certain issues that currently the industry is facing, and how JFrog platform is able to actually help secure that software supply chain. We'll be diving deeper into our security offerings, that is JFrog's X-Ray, Advanced Security, and Curation, right? So let's start off with like the open source packages, right? If you look at like, that's just at the tip of the iceberg. We just have your open source code, like the code that you're building. And then to support that particular application, there's a whole lot of things that we actually bring in terms of, hey, there's a lot of open source packages, there's containers, base layers that you actually rely on. and the operating systems and some of the infrastructure as code. So if you look at it, like almost 99% of like the Fortune 500 companies use open source. So you get the scale of, how much of the adoption of these open source packages are. And typically today's modern software, almost 85 to 90% of these are open source. And with this steady rate of increase in these open source packages, we've seen that like the 57% of growth of CVEs from like 2020, and it's just 4 years and it's still growing more and more. And typically, if we look at like a standard or a typical flow of how a software is being built, where your developers or engineers rely on like the public repositories like PyPy, NPM, or Docker Hub to pull down all of these open source packages like Maven Central, then you kind of store it in some location where you're having that app, and then as it progresses along that SDLC phases, that is where you do some of your builds are happening, and your DevOps teams are working on some of the releases, and this production team that is handling or deploying of these applications into your runtime systems. And all along at the initial stages, you deal with source code and binaries. And once it moves past the build stage, it is binaries or containerized binaries. That is the standard where your production applications are running in with some kind of native binaries or containerized binaries, right? And with this, as more and more open source packages are being used, if you look at like NPM, the one of the most popular registries out there, back in 2020, we had like almost 162 malicious packages. And today, we almost are up to like 6,500 malicious packages just on that public registry and just an NPM. Imagine there's like all other technologies, all other areas where there's more. We're just talking about one malicious package, right? And if you're coming back to that same the landscape that we just saw in like the development of the applications, you have all these different areas where the attackers are trying to exploit, or introduce some kind of threat actors in like different stages. If you're looking at like at the development phase, like especially with the public repositories, that is where you have all of these malicious packages that are bundled inside these open source packages. And while you're building your apps, there are high chances of creating those 0-day vulnerabilities where which is totally relied on something that you are building. And as it progresses through those build stages, we have CVEs, the common vulnerabilities that are exploitable. And once it comes to the release phases, that is where your configurations of like secrets or infrastructure as code or application misconfigurations like Nginx misconfigurations or Envoy misconfigurations, all those different areas are actually causing or giving the opportunity for the intruders to actually exploit your software supply chain. And we need some kind of capability where there's one particular platform or one solution that can actually help strengthen this entire supply chain, right? And that is where JFrog has evolved from a DevOps company or DevOps offering to a DevSecOps, where we are able to actually provide capabilities which will actually help you strengthen that or secure that the software supply chain. And what I mean by is essentially we have JFrog Artifactory, which you've used or looked at in the previous webinar, where you're able to actually manage all of your artifacts, like 32 different types. And today we'll be focusing on the security aspects, and those are the X-Ray Essentials, the JFrog Advanced Security, and Curation, right? And when JFrog Curation, what it means is essentially you're able to actually seamlessly block any of these open source packages without the need to even actually pull it down into Artifactory. And once something is there, you have the JFrog X-Ray that is essentially helping you with your software composition analysis, your license compliance, operational risks, and malicious package detection, software bill of materials, whole lot of those are being able to covered by the X-ray. And when we actually take it to the next level with the advanced security, where Sam will be covering most of the stuff, is essentially we are putting or giving the capabilities in terms of, hey, we are checking if this specific CVE is actually applicable or not applicable by doing that contextual analysis, secret detections, static code analysis, and a whole lot. And in the next upcoming sessions, you'll be diving deep into the JFrog distribution and also the JFrog Connect of these specific areas. Right. So let's start with like, why actually do we need X-ray, right? So the JFrog X-ray is able to scan, like similar to how Artifactory is like a universal platform where you're able to support different types of technologies, different types of packages. X-ray is also in the same space. We are able to actually scan with one single solution. You're able to scan binaries, containers, also your code and things like that. And you're able to actually gain full visibility into your artifact management, into your supply chain, into your builds, because you're storing all of these artifacts closer to Artifactory, and X-ray has a full visibility in terms of the software bill of materials, dependencies, and all that information, right? And also, fixing fast really matters, right? You want to know what exactly a vulnerable component is impacting. That impact analysis is provided by X-ray, right? For every individual package, you're able to actually tell that, hey, with this specific component, I have the blast radius in terms of there's so many other repositories where this specific component is there, and these are all the affected. So you're able to get super fast reports out of the X-ray. And you're also able to actually gain full visibility of your security posture or full control, in the sense that we have X-ray has like a robust policy management system where you can actually build certain security policies that are applicable to your organization, and that can be applied across like a global policies or specific to a release repositories or things like that. And finally, all of the X-rays, similar to how Artifactory have rich integrations with many of like the Jira's, AWS, and many other more, and also extend the capabilities in terms of like REST APIs, CLIs, and also you can integrate the JFrog CLI into your CI system and actually have the builds also scan as part of this. And the same goes with the JFrog platform, is essentially can be deployed across your own on-premise instance or a self-hosted environment, SaaS, whatever the topology is, the solution just fits, right? So let's actually dig into some of like the policy management, which will actually, not just from a perspective saying that, okay, these are all the scans are happening, but you also want to get some kind of state where you're actually able to tell you that, hey, all of these are my security policies. I need to know how exactly I'm compliant within my organization. What is the health? What is the posture? And that is where policies and watches comes into pictures. I'll actually just jump into the X-ray console itself, so you are able to actually look at some of the stuff. Before that, just give a brief introduction on these. So policies are nothing but like, think of these like a set of rules that it's like a definition where you have a bunch of rules, and rules have a criteria and automatic actions. Criteria meaning you can select, hey, I want to select all the CVEs with, let's say, 7.8 or 9 above or things like that. That is like a set of criteria. And there's an automatic action associated. For example, if that criteria is actually violated, automatic actions such as like, webhooks, Jira integrations, and failing the builds, blocking downloads, all of those are certain automatic actions that you can actually achieve with having X-ray. And when it comes to the watch is more of like you're actually taking that policy and applying it to, or tying it to different resources within Artifactory. That is like different repositories, different builds, different release bundles. If we look at as a sample security policy and a Docker watch, essentially, here is one of the security policy where I have a rule for a minimum severity level. That is my criteria. And an automatic action is if this criteria is met, I want to create a Jira ticket and also fail the builds. And a similar one is like another minimum severity level. Here it could be a critical one. Here it could be a low, where I could just send an email notification. And actually, I can tie the security policy to all of my Docker repositories and like Docker builds. So you're actually able to control these automatic actions on those set of specific repositories. And the way how it would look like is if we go into I'll just put this one here. So let's actually log into your the JFrog platform. And once you actually log in, you'll be actually able to see like Artifactory, X-Ray, and other stuff right here in your console. And within the X-Ray, I'll actually first jump into a few things that will actually help to kick off the tires. Is under the index resources, you have this capability where you're actually telling X-Ray to actually scan all the repositories. One second. Are you able to actually see my screen? I'm just making it a little bigger. Perfect. Cool. So yeah, so within the X-Ray, you go to index resources, and here you have the capability to actually add certain repositories. There should be few repositories that are already pre-populated in your instances, where you can actually select what are all the repositories that you want to X-Ray to index. Here you can actually move around, just move all the repositories to indexing and just hit save. And X-Ray would automatically start digging into those different repositories, and it will start building all of those component graphs and breaking it down, doing that deep recursive scanning of all of those repositories. So once you do this, this is like the first initial step that you do. And once you actually do that, you actually now go into creating certain policies, right? When I was talking about policies, X-Ray will give you the capability to actually create policies for three different or three or more different types of policies. That is like a security policy, a license policy, and operational risk, right? When we're talking about security, so let's actually go and create one. Like let's say demo sec policy. Right here, you select if you wanted to create a security policy, a license policy, or an operational risk. So we'll just get started with the security one, right? And here I want to say that I want to identify just giving a condition like let's say CVSS 9 above. So I want to identify like what are all the CVEs within my specific Artifactory or all the components where I want to go by a CVS score. So this is the criteria that I was talking about. I want to go anything about 9. So you have the different options where you can go by a severity level, what JFrog does, or if you want to go by a CVS score, or if you want to identify, let's say, hey, I already know a certain set of CVEs. I want to identify those. You're able to actually select those particular CVE IDs. For example, log4j. We already know there are a certain set of published CVEs, and you can actually put all of those log4j CVEs and use that as your criteria, right? And this is the second piece, that is the automatic actions. And when we're talking about the automatic actions, these are the capabilities that X-Ray does provide in terms of, hey, if this particular criteria meets, I want to be able to generate like, trigger a webhook, right? So for a webhook, I actually have this this particular site where you actually can can create a mock webhook. If you wanted to try, this is something that will help you actually configure a webhook. I've already pre-configured it. I'll just quickly show you where you actually can configure. But once you select a webhook, you can always come back and add this information as well. But you can also add like your email notifications if you wanted to do an email notification. And if Jira is integrated into the platform, we can actually create a ticket automatically into your Jira system. And the most important part is, or the most important capability is actually blocking the download of an artifact, right? With artifacts being stored with an artifact tree, and X-Ray has this integration where it has a control of if this particular criteria is met in any of those repositories that you're going to tie it, you can actually block those downloads. And when the CI is actually integrated, this is where the capability is there. You can actually fail the build. So for this purpose, I'll just not do any blocking. I'll just do like a webhook notification, but also you'll be able to see what are the violations this will raise. Once we put in this rule, you can just hit create, right? Once you hit create, your policy should be here. So this is just a policy definition. This doesn't mean that once you create a policy, it'll automatically start doing the notifications, because X-Ray doesn't know to actually which particular repositories it has to apply this specific policy that we just created, right? Now you actually go into watches, and this is where you're having that flexibility to tie it to a different set of repositories, right? So for example, I'll just create a new watch and say, we'll say demo watch CVSS 9, and we'll tie it to all of our Docker, right? So what you can do is here, you can actually select all of the repositories that you want this particular policy to be tied to. So I just want to apply this on all of my Docker repositories. And this is where if you've attended the first series of Artifactory, you'll be able to know that, hey, the 4-part naming convention comes in handy to like identify, if I want to apply across all of my Docker, or if I want to apply across only all of my production repositories, things like that. So here you're selecting it. And once you pop all of those lists here, you're actually able to apply, saying you already selected these specific repositories. Now you're actually selecting that security policy that we just created, right? We did a demo security policy. And once you actually do this, this is where that whole policy management things happen. The main advantage that you're getting out of this is once this particular policy and watch is tied up, that is where X-Ray will give you a posture on, hey, what are all of the resources that actually violated my security policy, right? The one that we just created, I also had like a few of the ones that were pre-populated. Let me see if I think X-Ray needs to apply this particular security policy. I have some already created for a security policy similar to that, where if you notice for this security policy, these are all the resources that are actually violated. So you know that, hey, these are all the repositories. These are all the violations, different severity levels. And this one is for a secret exposure. So you know that in all of these particular repositories, there are secrets being exposed, and X-Ray is able to identify that. And when you actually going back to that automatic actions, if you look at this webhook, you are actually able to see that in this webhook, X-Ray has posted a specific webhook out saying that, hey, these are all the specific policies that are getting violated, and these are all the resources that are associated with it. So if you wanted to implement this, it'll be more of like, if there's another system that you want to publish this information to, you are able to extend these or push out this information and do the next steps of that process that you wanted to do. So it gives you that all of the paths, the names, and also the SHAs. So you know that what exact components are actually violating these particular policies. And if we go back, now that we got a good understanding of what a policy and a watch is doing, let's actually jump into a piece where how this whole thing actually works. And this is where the X-ray behind the scenes does a whole lot of things, where JFrog has a research team. We are a CNA, that is a CVE numbering authority, and we have research team that actually gathers a whole lot of information from all of these external sources, and also enriches all of these data with all of the security information that you wouldn't find out in the public sources. So we update that global X-ray database, and once you have your X-ray instance, it'll have its own metadata, and it will have its own component graph. So based on the policies and watches, whatever are there, X-ray will just look at, hey, these are all the repositories, these are all the different policies, and I know all of the component graphs, where exactly it is. It all works, and then it raises violations. And once the violations are raised, automatic actions get triggered. That is, if you have like a webhooks, the one that we just saw, you also have integrations to like Slack, all those different capabilities, and like the ones that we saw in terms of failing the builds, preventing downloads because it has that integration to Artifactory. And this is where how X-ray works behind the scenes to create that policy management. But to show the main glory of the system itself is, let's actually jump into the scans itself, right? If you go into the X-ray scans list, you should be able to see certain repositories. And we will also be pushing some Docker images as part of this. So you'll be able to see, some of the more, feel free to pull down more images, whatever you want to push, you can push it. Just create certain repositories if you want, or if there's a default repository already available, you can push into it and have that X-ray index. What I mean is, I'll just pick one example of the Flask web code Docker image that I pre-built. Is if you just jump into this, you'll get a quick posture of the security, what exactly is happening with this specific Docker image, in terms of like, what are the CVEs, what are the policy violations, what are the different software components as part of this Docker image, right? First, we'll hit the vulnerabilities itself. So X-ray, the indexing that you did, that will help X-ray to populate all of this information for, hey, these are all the CVEs associated with. So this is where the indexing actually comes in into the picture. And if I pick one of this particular example, where this is one of the CVE with like CVSS score, we give you information on, hey, what exactly, this is the information that you would find in like a public source. And JFrog actually enriches this particular information and gives you a reasoning behind why we think that this specific CVE is actually having the severity, what are the possible exploitations, and all this information. And the impact graph that we were talking about this is where, like, hey, in this specific Docker image, this is a specific layer. And within this layer, this is the specific Debian package, which has the CV. So you know where exactly in which layer the specific package is, and you can find that information, right? And that is one thing. And when we move about into the software bill of materials, that is where X-ray is actually automatically able to generate the software bill of materials of all of the packages that are included, or the ingredients that took to make up this particular Docker image, right from the base image. We're not just looking at just the layer that we just pushed, but like pretty much everything that is from the base layers. And you have this capability where from the dashboard itself, you are actually able to export the scans in like a SPDX format or the Cyclone DX format. And these are the industry standards for the software bill of materials. So you're already getting, without doing any additional steps, you're actually getting what are all the components that are use to build up this Docker image. When you're actually sharing software, this is one of the more important aspects of it. And if I want to show one other thing is in this particular example is X-Ray is also able to identify malicious package, right? We talked about that malicious package where it's growing exponentially, and this is like X-Ray. Our JFrog research team actually adds in all of this information, so you automatically know that, hey, these are all the malicious packages, and just by that security policy, you can actually create a security policy saying, hey, this is my criteria for malicious package. If you found any malicious package, just block the download, like no questions asked. Like you don't have to rethink about, oh, is it applicable, how critical it is or not, you just block it. So that capability is available along with that impact graph to know where exactly in which layer you're identifying, right? And if you look at this particular policy violations, remember the policy that we created and tied it to a Docker repository. This is where, based on the policies that I have, these are all the violations. So if you're looking at want to tell that how compliant my specific Docker image is according to my organization standard, this is where you look at in terms of policy violations. Hey, these are all the policies that this Docker image violated, and you get to decide what you actually want to do about this, right? And if in a scenario saying that, hey, you know that this specific policy is or violation is not applicable, or you don't think that this can be ignored because someone is actually working on it, we give you the capability to actually create an ignore violation where you are able to actually select this particular vulnerability or specific version, and then you can actually create an expiration rule saying that, okay, I know that this so-and-so team is working until the end of the month to get this particular issue resolved. So you can actually create this ignore violation, and X-Ray will stop raising like those automatic actions because you already marked it as ignore violation until 30th. Once it hits that 30th mark, you'll actually able to start noticing that particular violations again. So this is pretty much in terms of what the X-Ray has to offer in terms of the SCA and the malicious packages. The thing with JFrog as an organization, what we wanted to do is actually go and provide all these different capabilities to the developers and everyone, all the engineers. They don't have to come, or you don't have to come and see right in the ID. It's in the X-Ray dashboard, but we actually introduced the extensions where you can actually get all of this information right in the IDs itself. So if you have already cloned that specific the code that in the Git repository, I want you to go into your IDE, if it's a VS Code or an IntelliJ, and from the extensions, actually search for JFrog. And once you have this JFrog, once you have this JFrog extension, you can actually install it. And once you install it, you get to actually connect it to your SaaS instance. So it'll ask you for an authentication. You can put in your username, password, and it will help you authenticate it. Once you authenticated that, what you can do is, so if this is import that specific Git repository into your VS Code or your IDEs. And if you look at this particular requirements.txt, here you notice that these are all the dependencies that, or all the open source dependencies that I use to actually build this particular application, right? These are all the stuff that I'm pulling from the pip registry. One thing that you can do is, if I go back into the X artifactory, here in the artifactory, you have the capability to create different remote repositories. What I did before the session is actually create a remote repository to the pip registry. So here you'll be able to notice that this specific remote repository is actually pointing to the pip registry, and any pip installs that I do actually will go through Artifactory. And I'll just briefly touch on it. But essentially, if you want to do it, just create a repository. Later, we'll be able to send out some information, so you can just walk along this particular recording. And here you can actually select, hey, this is particular configuration that you need to apply it in one of your pip config, and then just get started with doing a pip install. I've already done that, and here is this CLI as well. So once I do a pip install, all of these particular packages will get downloaded from the pip registry, but it'll get proxied through Artifactory. All the requests will get proxied through Artifactory. So with the JFrog's extension, you'll be able to see this particular icon. Once you've logged in, you can click this particular refresh icon, and it'll actually go and do a scan on all of the specific dependencies that are actually being used. The one thing that I was actually talking about is getting all of this information. That is where doing that shift left strategy of providing your developers the security details needed right during the development phase itself, so that they can actually start thinking about, hey, see, these are all the open source packages that I'm using. I don't have to wait until certain build happens and then someone give me a security report. With just a scan in the IDE, I'm actually able to come here and look at, oh, so these are all the packages, and like these are all the direct and indirect dependencies that have been pulled in. And here is like the CV information, like you get the scores, and also the JFrog research information that I was talking about. So here is a whole lot of information where, hey, these specific capabilities are actually are the ones that are creating the problems, and these are the research information about it. And this is also that impact graph that we were talking about. Is essentially, you see this specific package is hidden inside the Flask, and Flask is hidden inside this specific dependency inside my requirements.txt. So you are able to get that information. And one of the best part is you actually can know from this is, what do I need to do? Like in this scenario, it's like as simple as updating a dependency version. In more complex scenarios, you'll have more information of how do you actually remediate that. And this is where you are able to get like all of this information in the IDEs of these particular the software composition analysis. And now if we look back into our capabilities, this is one area. And another area where we are extending the same capabilities are actually the CLI. So with the CLI, we have this JFrog CLI where you're able to use it for, pushing of these artifacts, for all of the Artifactory management. But also you can use the same CLI to actually run scans on your code, on your packages, and on your binaries, on your Docker images, and things like that. So for example, if we go into the specific CLI, I'll just increase the size here. And here I have that same Python application that we just pulled down. And I can do like JFrog, that is a JFrog CLI. It'll give you like what are the version, what are all the capabilities where you can run your Artifactory commands, your X-ray commands, all other things. To get started, what you can do is you can run JFrog config, and this will actually help you to configure your credentials to the CLI. So the SaaS instance that you're using, you're able to actually communicate to that specific instance once you add that configurations. And once you do that, it's pretty much you're running all of your commands against that environment, right? And with that one command, what I can do is, if I do it clear, you can do JFrog audit. This is one single strong or super powerful command where with just two words, I actually am doing dependency scans looking for all of my dependencies, looking for all of the security issues that are related to that particular dependencies. As you have those more advanced capabilities, which in a second Sam would go into it, but you will actually uncover more and more capabilities in terms of security. Just to give an example, the scan is happening behind the scenes, but here, if you notice, you're actually able to look at, hey, these are all the associated issues in terms of, these are all the dependencies that I'm using. These are all the severities. These are the versions. And also here, you also have the fixed versions information available. So you are able to get like, hey, I just need to bump these versions. You also have to do some kind of regression testing for your application, but you're able to get all this information. So where exactly this will help, this will be useful is if you're CLI savvy like me, you'll be happy, to have this capability to use the CLI to run these scans, and the same CLI can actually be integrated into your CI systems to actually run the same JF audit to get the state of that particular release. Or if you want to scan the entire build, you have JFrog's scan build. So you are able to actually scan the build itself to get all this security information. And behind the scenes, this is also running those other capabilities, which we'll touch in a second. But this is where you are able to actually run. You can install this particular CLI. If you go to our, just go to Google, search JFrog CLI, we'll be able to take you to the Git repository or the download page, and you should be able to install it and connect it to your system. And to actually bring it to a next level is, we were talking about different areas or the different pieces where the supply chain gets exploited. That is where this is all helping you protect right in your development phase. And one other aspect to it is we have your version control systems where those can also be exploited, or the attacker can try to find weaknesses or issues within your Git repositories. And that is where we also have this capability called FrogBot. Essentially, what it does is it can sit on top of your Git repositories and do two kinds of scan. One is it can scan for a PR. So if someone raises a PR, you can actually, the FrogBot can actually do a scan to identify if there's any CVs or any vulnerabilities that are introduced as part of that particular pull request. Or if not, you can have like a continuous scan, let's say like a timely scan that happens every 2 hours, 3 hours, or every midnight. You can have that continuous scan triggered to identify all of the issues associated to that specific Git repositories. So in that particular Git repository, I've also included some of the workflows. So this particular example goes with the GitHub Actions. So I have this particular the pipeline code or the GitHub Actions code that will help you to actually run the scans. Once you have it handy, or once you have it up and running, how it would look like is, for a pull request, or I'll just take this example. So within the GitHub Actions, you'll be able to see that, hey, this is a repository scan, like a scheduled scan and like a manual scan that I triggered. And you'll be able to see that it actually scanned that master branch, and it's using the same JFrog CLI, and it's using your access tokens or the JFrog configuration, and the FrogBot is doing all of the scans for this. And once it's identified something, it will actually say that, hey, these are all the associated issues. And actually, FrogBot automatically raised a PR. And so the PR is sitting for me saying that you actually need to update the version of the request package to 2.31.0. So here, almost 40% of the work is automatically done by JFrog's FrogBot. Essentially, you're able to actually get like, hey, this is a dependency. This is a fixed version is already available. You just have to now merge that code, right? And we also actually publish the security details into the security piece of the thing, where you actually have like different capabilities in terms of some of the static code analysis, some of the secrets, some of the exposures and all that information, vulnerabilities. So you actually get the status of, hey, what exactly does the security posture look like of my Git repositories? So this is all of those capabilities that will actually help, you know, provide the security details in that shift left. And this is where you're able to identify all that informations. I know there's a whole lot of things. We'll be sharing this recording. You will be able to easily have all of these integrations up and running and actually get a feel of how actually it looks like. There's this nice little documentation on how do you actually set up that Frogbot. And if you want to actually dive into some of those capabilities, this is where I put one link in the chat. This is related to all of the integrations in terms of IDEs, in terms of CLIs, Frogbots, CI integrations that you can actually search for in like one single place. This is one really good documentation where we maintain specifically for a developer focus, right? And that is where I just wanted to stop here and just give like the areas what we just covered in terms of the X-ray essentials is just with the X-ray, you're able to actually do the software bill of materials, vulnerability scanning, malicious packages, operational risk, license compliance, and also like all these integrations that will help you actually get all the security information without even the need to actually wait until the CI or build happens. And with that, I'll just pause here and hand it over to Sam. And feel free to actually, if you have any questions, feel free to post it in the Q&A. We'll be happy to answer. Awesome. Hey, Sam.
Sure. Thank you so much, Roshan. That was very helpful. So I don't see any new questions on the webinar chat.
Do you want me to stop sharing, Sam? And
Sure. Yeah, we can do that too. Okay. So I'll share my screen. I don't see any questions on the webinar chat. And here goes the thing. Okay. So currently, Roshan covered all of these things, which are handled by X-Ray, which is our essentials security tool, which is SBOM, software bill of materials, vulnerabilities, malicious packages, operational risk, licenses, Frogbot, CLI, and plugins. So we also have another security offering called Advanced Security. So I just want to list them out and go through the details of how it works. This is also a security scanner. It takes your software package and scans it for these things. So Advanced Security, one of the things that it does is contextual applicability scanner, or we call it contextual analysis. So it can look at your code inside the binary. Basically in Java, it's a bytecode, but in case of Python and Node.js, code is the binary. So, and it can see if the vulnerable functions are being called or not, and give a status of whether it's applicable or not. So, yeah. So I see a question that's asking, how do you handle false positives? So can you please expand on this? What do you mean by false positives? So there is a known vulnerability, and if that vulnerability is available on in the artifact that you're scanning, it shows up on the scan results. So can you please give an example of what you mean by false positive? So Roshan, I think this question might be back to you.
Yes, you can continue. Rich and I are on the Q&A. So
Okay.
really, please feel to post it there. We'll be able to answer it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. So I'll keep going with this. Rich and Roshan will be able to reply to your questions on the chat window. So from the and one other thing that is handled is secrets detection. So I also call it advanced secrets detection because one of the things, if you remember the huge ride sharing app data leak that happened in 2016, in fact, the CISO of that company was indicted and sentenced to 3 years of imprisonment. Again, he got commuted, but that huge ride sharing incident that happened, it was because one of the developers put in a secret in the code, somewhere they hard coded it, and they pushed it to a public repository. And somebody, a malicious actor, found that key, got access to the object storage S3 buckets, and were able to download the personal information. So one of the other things that we do is advanced secrets detection. So you might be thinking there is secrets detection that is available in many tools. What's so special about advanced security? So we do advanced secret detection, meaning there's been many times where I export access tokens in my bash terminal because I copy the AWS or whatever cloud that I'm using, the token, and I do an export. And sometimes when I log in and when I'm testing inside a Docker image, I might export them and I might forget. So those things get stored in the RC history file of any Linux-based operating system. And if the developers are not super knowledgeable and if they don't remember to clean up those access tokens after their testing or whatever is done, those might end up on public registries like Docker Hub. So we also scan images for secrets. Library misuse, service misconfiguration is kind of complicated to explain. So I will switch on to the UI and show an example of what each of these do. We also do Terraform scanning, IAC security analysis. So Terraform scanning is is done in two parts. So remember Roshan mentioned about IDE plugins. So you can install a Docker desktop plugin. Sorry, not a Docker desktop, like a VS Code plugin. And that VS Code plugin can scan your Terraform source files. That's one way to scan it. And the second way to scan it is you can use Artifactory as a backend store. Usually the backend store is either the Terraform Cloud or S3 bucket. So you can either use Artifactory also is a compatible Terraform backend store. So you can either configure Artifactory, create a repository in Artifactory to use Terraform backend store and use that for your state management, or you can upload a state file that you have created on your local or on your S3 or from Terraform Cloud. So it can look at the state file and look at all the misconfigurations in that Terraform state file, or in the other case, on your local machine with your VS Code plugin, and give you a list of all the security problems. And last but not the least, we also do SAST scanning, static code analysis. And I'll go through one of the examples in today's demo. So quick thing, how many, do you already have the Git clone that Roshan was showing? If you have, can you type +1 in the chat, please? Just in the regular chat window, +1. Okay, I see some +1s. So that's good news. Okay, I see some more. So just in case you don't have it, this is the Git repo that Roshan was using. 1 second. So Roshan, can you please put that Git repo in the chat? Or I'll also paste it in the chat.
Oh, I just posted it soon.
Perfect. So you can go and you can just clone that Git repo. So it's git clone and then link of that repository. So if you already haven't done it, this is the command to do it. So again, for now, just please clone it because we'll get to it in a little bit. And I'm also posting some of the instructions in the chat window. So Yeah, let's run through those instructions one by one. Okay, perfect. I just copied commands in the Zoom chat. It's all mushed up together, but if you copy it in your Notepad or Sublime or Atom or any of those text editors, you should be able to see it line by line. Okay, so I will start. I will, 1 second. So, okay. So I'm running the first command now. So before I even go here, let me also quickly show some of the examples of what this can do. So I'll do a very quick overview of what are the expectations of after you run this and what are you gonna see. And then we can do it like a hands-on workshop where we can follow along and have a Q&A session to make sure it's working for you. So one of the things, if we go back to this slide, is contextual analysis. So let's start with contextual analysis. So if I go to vulnerabilities, contextual analysis is a part of vulnerabilities. So Roshan may have showed this to you, but I'm just trying to deep dive into it and break it down and explain what it is. So if you look at this vulnerability, it is saying applicable. I'm scrolling down and I see something that this CVE is not applicable. So let me give an example. So everybody might have known about the log4j vulnerability that happened a few months ago. So just because a log4j.jar file is sitting on your file system somewhere in your /opt folder doesn't automatically mean that this application is vulnerable, because maybe there is nothing that's actually calling that log the method which has the vulnerability inside of log4j. So applicability scanner is exactly looking for that. So when I actually click on this and click on this contextual analysis tab, and if I look, I can see in the main.python file, again, this is a Python example. This works for Node.js, Java, and few other technologies. But for this example, I'm going through the same, in the same continuation of what Roshan did, showing a Python-based example. So there is this function called full load, which is susceptible to this vulnerability, the CVE 2020-1947. So this allows unauthenticated network attackers to perform code execution when parsing a crafted YAML file. So if I do contextual analysis, this full load function is being called in the main Python file on line 30. It's also being called in line 34. And there's another function, other Python library, YAML _client. In line 4, this is being called. So it's able to look at the code of which line is calling which function. And based on that, it can say if this vulnerability applies to you or not. So one of our statistics is that about 78% of the vulnerabilities are not even applicable, are not exploitable applicables. Exploitable vulnerabilities, meaning, yeah, they are vulnerabilities, yes, but because you are inside a VPN, because you have other hardening, or because you have other compensating controls, that vulnerability cannot really be exploited in your organization. So because of that, we are able to save a lot of time for the development team. So just imagine about if there are 100 vulnerabilities, and we already tell you that 78 of them are not even applicable to you. Instead of wasting 100 hours in fixing them, you only spend 12 hours in fixing the ones that are really, really applicable to you. That's like 78 hours of, again, I'm oversimplifying it by saying 78 hours, but 78 times n hours of the time that is saved on the development team. So that is about contextual analysis. And then there is secrets detection. So let me go to the secrets tab here. And it's able to look at plain text API keys, something like this. It can look at hard-coded secrets that are in the code. And it even shows you the line number where this hard-coded secret is located. It can look at weak default passwords like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or password that is literally lowercase password. If any of those are being used, it can show them. Expired certificates is one more thing, and self-signed certificate that's not being authenticated by a third-party store, or basically self-signed certificate, the PIM files. So it can look all of these problems. These are just some examples. It can look anything in this realm of things. And then we have library misuse. So this one is kind of interesting. So let's go through an example. So in this case, I'll find random example. Node.js application logins are not throttled. So again, with the onset of SPA single page applications, most of the applications are in Angular or React mostly. I think I would say React more than Angular these days. So when, again, also Node.js applications, yes, but these applications, if we do not throttle, meaning if somebody is logging in through the front end, putting the username and password, if you give them an immediate response as fast as the server can reply, somebody can use a dictionary attack, like a list of passwords, and just hit that API and get response every 1 millisecond, and to see if this password is correct or this password is wrong. So one of the compensating control to prevent attackers from doing dictionary attacks is by throttling the logins. So throttling is nothing but putting a asynchronous time delay in the response. So before, as soon as the submit happens, and before, even though the server immediately processes and the server knows if this is a real password or not, or if the password is correct or not, it's not gonna immediately reply back. It's gonna wait for some random milliseconds. Again, it has to be random, because if it's a certain time delay, attackers can use that time delay to sniff out and see if this is a correct password or wrong password, even though, so in a way, use a modified engineered way of doing a dictionary attack. So they are able to, so one of the best practices that we ask developers to follow is throttling them. So it can even give an example saying that Express is used, so this needs to be fixed. Or in this case, again, it goes through a list of best practices. Some of the best practices, for example, let me show in case of services, right? Let me show another example which has best practice. So it's basically giving a list of issues that need to be fixed. So this is just one example. It does a lot of other things, like passwords stored by Node.js applications are not using the encryption module, meaning instead of encrypting them, it's just being stored in plain text. So all of those things, it gives a list of issues to be fixed so that your overall application security posture is improved. So that's about application misuse, this library misuse feature of advanced security. We also have something called a services misconfiguration. So services misconfiguration is also a Docker thing. So this is a Docker image if you see. So in a Docker image, you usually see a bunch of other stuff. So like 15 years ago, it was just the jar file or just the Python file that ran on the virtual machine. But now Docker is it's literally an operating system, or a skinny version of the operating system, in lack of simpler terms, that's running this library that in which the code exists, or this binary. So in that Docker image, it has a bunch of extra stuff, like Envoy is one of the things. It has Prometheus. Prometheus is for logging and monitoring. And it has a bunch of TLS stuff, and it has Apache HTTP server. So many of them has Nginx HTTP server. And one other example is ETC client. So even though the application itself is secure, Envoy admin interface may be externally exposed, or the ETC peer or ETC client is not using TLS encryption, or Prometheus may have basic authentication disabled, or the Nginx server may not enforce the TLS version of a certain strength. So it basically looks through all of these things and gives you suggestions on what to be fixed. So for example, Apache is not preventing MIME type sniffing. So these are various different types of known attacks. And in the services misconfiguration checklist, it's going through all of these things that the Docker image has and looking for how to harden those images. So maybe any of these things could be used as attack vectors to gain access into your systems. And this specific scanner is trying to look at all the loopholes and trying to close them or patch them. So that's about services misconfiguration. Last one amongst the scanner is in ISA scanner. So let me find an example for this. Okay, so I'll give me 1 second. Yeah. So as I mentioned, in this case, Artifactory is being used as the backend store. So in this case, it doesn't have any issues, but let me find another example. Give me a few seconds. In the meantime, do you have any questions on what we have discussed so far? Okay, I don't see anything. Okay. One more second. I'm logging into my other instance on my other screen so that I can show how the Terraform scanning works. Okay. So while, okay, we are almost there. Okay, so I'm sharing my screen again. So in this case, this is a Terraform state file, a state backend file. It is looking for various different things. So it checked for, like if you see, it checked for 46 different things. Again, it checks for way more than that, but based on which services are being used, in this case, it checked for 46 different things. And it's saying that all of these things are good. For example, the root AWS IAM user has active access keys, which is a good thing, or does not. I mean, since it checked okay, that basically means that it doesn't have active access keys, or it doesn't have any unencrypted data in transit between AWS ECS host and server. Public RDS instances are not publicly accessible because databases are supposed to be according to the 3-tier architecture design and best practices. It's not supposed to be externally exposed to the external world. It's only supposed to be accessed by the servers that are running the applications. CloudFront, so it goes through a list of things about ELB data at rest encryption, data in transit encryption, weak policy for IAM passwords, publicly accessible Redshift clusters, meaning any of the database stores that are publicly accessible, plain text passwords in the ECS task definitions. So it goes through all of these things and it's saying that these are good, but it also checks for other stuff and complains about them so that you can make those changes and make your application more secure or your infrastructure more secure. So in this case, it's saying that authorization is not enforced for all AWS API gateway methods. So that means somebody can use certain APIs without authorization and accidentally get access to information that is private. Or public policies are not restricted for S3 buckets. Or data at rest encryption is not enabled for S3 buckets. This is one of the other reasons there's been so many different S3 leaks. And this was one of the reasons. In fact, few months ago, AWS started enforcing everybody to have data at rest enabled by default. Previously, it was optional, but now they're kind of forcing everybody to do it. So it goes through a list of all these best practices and make sure that your infrastructure is also secure. And last but not the least, the SAST analysis. If I go back to this slide. So for the SAST analysis, I'll quickly show and we can all do this together. So if you can please open if you can, I just copied a command in the group in the chat window that says git clone and a certain repository. So if you can please run this, we can all do this together. And one other prerequisite for this is to have a Visual Studio Code installed on your machine.
Yeah, and Sam, folks had some issues copying this command. I actually put a link in the chat to a live code snippet. And I believe while you're touching on the Docker push, I don't think many of them have like the Frog's Docker dev local repository. If you can just quickly walk them through once you're done with this, it'll be helpful.
Sure. So let me share my screen again. So let's do step by step. Let's start with the SAST if that's okay. And then we can go to, so Roshan, the GitHub is on public, right? It's a public repository, the GitHub.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's start with that and then we'll go to the Docker.
Yep.
So in this case, all that I did was I ran this command, which is, or I can do it from scratch. Let me delete everything, or maybe I shouldn't delete in a live call, but it was basically git clone and github.com, this archive frog and Flask webgoat. Flask webgoat is basically, webgoat is in the pen testing world. There's a bunch of goat projects, which is basically for folks to learn how to use Burp Suite or any of those pen testing tools, or basically projects that have intentional vulnerabilities in them. So we found a project on GitHub or somewhere on the internet that has intentional vulnerabilities and cloned them so that we can show how advanced security is scanning and finding all the problems. So one of the first things is we downloaded it. All that I did was click here and opened that folder in on my VS Code. And I went to my JFrog plugin and I clicked on scan. So it's a one-time thing. It'll ask you for where your JFrog instance is located. And once you connect that, it'll start scanning. So in this case, it's showing me a bunch of problems like SQL injection attack. So this code base is susceptible to SQL injection because somebody can put a comment and put 1 = 1 and pretty much get the entire database, because in many cases, the where clause of SQL is determining who has access to what. But if they're able to take the arguments and put something like 1 = 1 and put a comment before that, it basically ignores everything before that, and it may be susceptible to attacks like SQL injection. So in this case, we are basically complaining. So one of the solution is sanitizing the input. So it even gives how to remediate this. So it's even telling us that instead of using placeholders that look like this, it's asking us to use the question mark symbols. For example, again, what are this called? The prepared statements. So something like this, it's easy to run SQL injection because I can pretty much pass anything that can pretty much. So in this case, because the password is password, I can pretty much say 1 = 1 or something that's always, and then put a comment sign after it and basically make SQL ignore all of this. But if we are using something like a prepared statement, it'll make sure that it sanitizes the input, and the prepared statement has an example on how to take care of those. So these are this is just one random example. This is another example, which is a stack trace exposure. So it's also giving how to remediate this problem. So if you look at this, it's basically saying use basically try to hide certain things which are not technically supposed to be exposed to the outside world. Unsafe deserialization. So sometimes in deserialization, if you put in a payload that can break the code that is doing deserialization and pretty much expose internal secrets or internal stacks. So things of that nature can be avoided by patching the code. Flask run. So there's a lot of things. So it does static code analysis, and it gives you a bunch of things which could be rewritten or which could be written to improve your security posture. So if you have any further questions on how to set this up, please put in a comment on the chat window or Q&A. Roshan, Richard, and Lawrence can help you out with that. So I'll wait for a few seconds to make sure. Hopefully this is clear. If you are following this and it's working for you, please put a +1 on the chat window. So I know everybody is on the same page. Is anybody having problems? Okay, I don't see anything on the webinar chat, so I'm assuming it went well. So we can move on to the next part of the workshop, a hands-on demo workshop, if everybody is okay with this part. Okay. Okay, so I'm assuming everybody is good with this. So I'll move on to the next part, which is not this. 1 second. Let me find that real quick. Let me put it in the chat window one more time.
Hey, Sam, I do have that link in the
Okay.
chat. If you want to access it, you want to share it on your screen, I just again put it in the chat.
Thank you so much, Roshan. This made it super helpful. Yes, perfect. I'll just share that. I was looking for this. I'm sharing my screen again. So this is the link Roshan shared. Please let us know if you cannot open this. Okay, so I'm starting to run this line by line. So the first step is open your command line and run the first command, which would pull this Docker image. I think I already ran this before, so it's going to be faster for me. But in your case, it might be slightly slower. So it's saying image is up to date for JFrog/demo-security latest. I'm waiting for a couple of seconds to make sure. If it's your first time, it can take a couple of seconds, 10 or 20 seconds to download the image. If you are able to do this, please ping yes or E+1 on the group chat. Okay, perfect. Thank you, Bing. Okay. So please let me know if it's done. For me, I already ran this before, so it's super fast. It replied almost instantly, but if this is your first time, it can take a couple of seconds. Okay, there's an issue. Roshan, do you want to take a look at that? This may not indicate Docker daemon is running.
I don't think the Docker engine is running. Charles, please post it in the Q&A. We'll be able to address it.
Okay. So the second thing is exporting this instance. I'm taking this instance. I know. So instead of, so let me show how the instance name I'm getting it. So I'm exporting this here and I'm going to my instance. So in this case, my instance is cloudnativewebinar.jfrog.io. In your case, it would be your name.jfrog.io or your company name.jfrog.io. So just copy that part of it and put it in this export command and run this command, which will just make my instance as the instance that you're using. Yeah, please don't use my instance because you won't have the password for it. But yeah, please use the instance that you have access to. Okay, and then the next step is copying this Docker login. And I'm pasting it. So you can just copy paste, it's gonna run. You don't have to modify anything here. And please remember the username and password. So in my case, it's my email. And my password is, 1 second, I need to fetch my password. And
And Sam, just bringing this up before you actually do it. Just make sure the repository, the Docker repository, is available before you do the tag.
okay, sure, yeah. So one of the things is, if you look at the code share that Roshan shared, the tag is looking for a repository called demo-security. Or no, 1 second, my instance. So frogs docker frogs docker dev local. So first thing is, in my case, I will already have that repository ready. But if you already don't have it, I would request you to please go to X-Ray and sorry, not X-Ray, Artifactory and repositories. Click on repository and create a local repo. So in my case, I already have this frogs docker dev local. If you see this frogs docker dev local. So please make sure you have this repository called frogs docker dev local, frogs-docker-dev-local. So it's pretty straightforward. Click on create repository, click on local. Once you click on this, click on Docker, paste this frogs docker dev local. In my case, it's saying key already exists because I already have this. Scroll here and click on create local repo, and it creates that local repo. Yeah, once you do this, please put a +1 on the chat window so we know that you are ready with this. Perfect. I see at least 1 +1. So I'll go to the next step. The next step is tagging the Docker. So remember, we just ran this command where I pulled JFrog/demo security image and the latest tag from Docker Hub. So I'm now tagging the Docker Hub image with my own instance tag. So if you look at this, my instance is already defined here. So I'm tagging this as Docker tag JFrog demo security latest, which is the one that we downloaded, and tagging it as my instance / frogs docker dev local / demo security. So we are still retaining the name demo security of the image, and we are just tagging it as local. If you'd like, you can put 0.01 or something, but for just because this is dev and testing purposes only, I'm tagging it as local. So I'm copying line 9 from the code share that Roshan created, line 9. And I pasted it on my terminal and I ran the command. So the tagging is done. So the next step is, please type a +1 once you do this. I know some of the participants are having issues with your Docker, but I don't think it's enough time for everybody to wait until the restart is done. You can always look at the recording. But if it's anything simple, you can always put it in the chat window, and some of Roshan or Richard or Lawrence can help you out. One other thing is, if your Docker desktop is not running, just click on your Docker desktop and make sure it says Docker desktop is running. If it doesn't, if it's not running, Docker commands are not going to work. So first thing is, make sure it's running. If you still get that error message, even if it's running, please restart your Docker desktop. That is the biggest reason why this would fail. Everything else is a complicated problem, but the biggest simple problem is Docker desktop not running. Okay, perfect. Okay, I see +1, +1, +1. So I'm glad it's working. So the last command would be docker push my instance frogs docker dev local / docker demo security latest. So I'm copying the last command and pasting it on my terminal. This is line 10 from the code share, and I'm pressing enter. Right. So this is the final command which pushed out actually line 10. I copied the wrong line. So line 10. So I'm copy pasting line 10 and doing a push. And it pushed this to the Docker repository on Artifactory. Once I do that, I am going back to my instance of Artifactory and going to X-ray. So because I already worked on this, it's showing up as on the scan list. But because this would be a first time doing this, I would click on Add Remove to X-ray button on the right side, this green button that you can see, and click on Add Repository. So this UI may look complicated, but it's pretty straightforward once you know what it's doing. So you will have the Docker desktop local on the left side. In this case, let me put it on the left side and put it back on the right side so you can see what I'm trying to do. So in your case, it's going to look something like this. Frogs Docker dev local. Frogs Docker dev local is going to be on the left side of the screen. So you can click on this little button here, or you can just select this and click on this single arrow. Single arrow will put only one repository to the right side. So I'm putting this single arrow that's pointing to the right side. So this would jump from the left side box to the right side box. Bleep. So it jumped to the right side box. And click on save. Yeah. Please put a +1 on the chat if you're able to do this or if you're having any problems. Perfect. 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 Okay. So okay, so it's almost done. I know I'm getting pinged about when it's going to be done. Okay, the last thing is once you put it here, it's going to show up on a scan list. And this is the image that we tagged and pushed. You may not see everything else that's here because we just added one into the repository. So if you click on this, you can look at SBOM, you can look at vulnerabilities, you can look at malicious packages, you can look at secrets, you can look at services exposures, and you can look at application exposures. So that kind of concludes the demo aspect of it. And we'd like to see if you have any questions or anything else that you'd like to do. Okay. So please say yes if you can see the results of the scanning. Okay, perfect. Perfect. I see yes, yes. Thank you so much. So let me show one last thing. So the demo part of it is done. I just want to show some more things that are in JFrog Security, and just also to summarize and basically go through everything that we just talked about. Okay. So I'm going back to my slides for a minute. Please bear with me. Okay, so X-ray policies, this was covered by Roshan. This is contextual analysis. This is the statistic that I was talking about. 78% of common CVEs are not exploitable. So contextual analysis can save you a lot of time. SAST versus SCA. SAST is about static application application security testing, looking at the source code. Well, SCA is software composition analysis, looking at the components that go inside a build and looking at the problems those components already have. That's the main difference. Okay. One last thing that I would like to add is about curation. So we spoke about X-ray that Roshan went into, which did SBOM, software bill of materials. Again, I don't know if you're in the federal space, but in the federal space, it's a necessity since 2001 to publish the software bill of materials. And many other industries are following suit. So we also have vulnerability detection, which Roshan talked about, malicious package detection. We have about 177 package definitions, malicious package definitions, and over 1,700, the last I know, are submitted by JFrog. So we are also an active company in this space. Operational risk, the libraries which are at the end of life or which have too few committers. Roshan also spoke about this. License types, especially on the copyleft licenses. So from in the open source world, there are two major types: permissive copyright licenses and the copyleft licenses, which came from the earlier era of open source, where the open source founders wanted companies to open source their own product if they are using an open source license. But a lot of things changed in the evolution of open source. So you can take automatic actions based on the license types. So this is about licenses. Of course, we also have ecosystem of products like CLI. In command line interface, we have FrogBot, which is like a robot that rewrites the code for you automatically and opens up a pull request. Roshan also spoke about the IDE plugins. We support 5 different plugins: Docker Desktop, IntelliJ, Eclipse, what else? And Visual Studio, and VS Code, of course. And we have a Docker Desktop plugin. So I'm not sure if this was covered, but let me quickly show how that works. So in the Docker Desktop plugin looks like this. You can take your local images and you can scan them on your developer machine. So one of the statistics is that it's 640 times more expensive to fix something in production versus fixing it in development. So this is what I'm talking about. So if you look at my screen, it's super expensive to fix something in production versus in coding. That's the reason why we are doing a lot of shift left approaches, where the problems are caught on the developer machine rather than being caught on the production side of things. And then to wrap it up, we also spoke about advanced security, contextual analysis, advanced secret detection, application exposure, services exposures, Terraform scanning, SaaS scanning. So the last but not the least is curation and catalog. So in curation, one of the main differences, so a lot of things, one of the first questions that I asked is, yeah, we can block packages before entering your organization. So yes, that's a good thing. X-ray can also block packages. If you remember, Roshan showed a UI button where you can block downloads, right? How is curation different from X-ray? So the main difference is curation is like a bouncer that's standing outside a nightclub, whereas X-ray is like a bouncer who's inside a nightclub. So you need both the bouncers. You need bouncers to kick out people who are too drunk or who are causing problems inside a nightclub. But you also need bouncers standing outside to make sure people under 21 are not getting inside a nightclub, or people who are already too drunk are not getting into a nightclub. So curation is the bouncer that's outside a nightclub. That's the main difference versus the one in X-ray who is inside the nightclub. So that's the main difference. And again, going back, it can create an audit trail of who is downloading what packages. You can set up automated policies based on open source package curation. You can set up CVE filters, license filters, and risk filters. And catalog is a comprehensive research tool. So I don't think we'll do a workshop for this hands-on, but I'll quickly show you and you can test it out on your instances. I don't know if your instances already come with curation, but if you're willing to try, you can always send out an email to the webinar organizers and they can help you with that process. So let me show an example of how curation works. So if I click on policy management, I can create a new policy saying I can select certain repositories. I can select this policy condition to block all malicious packages or to block all the packages that have a GNU GPL. If you remember, I was talking about copy left licenses, which require you to open source your packages if you use them. So you can block those kind of licenses. Or if it doesn't have identified license, or if it's an AGPL, it's the same problem with GPL, LGPL, and AGPL, the earlier type of copyleft licenses, or the package version is immature. So all of these things, you can put filters here. You can put exceptions saying that these exceptions are okay because we have already done research and it looks bad, but it's not that bad. So you can put those exceptions. You can either block them or you can dry run them. Blocking them is straight up blocking them. But in the dry run mode, you can see it on the audit screen that looks like this. So these are all the packages that got blocked. These are the packages that were allowed. But in the dry run, you can see what's being downloaded, because in the future, these are some of those borderline gray area things where you might want to block in the future. But for now, you want to allow developers to keep using them to stop, to prevent problems or to prevent productivity issues. So all of those features are available on curation. Again, the main thing is this is a firewall that sits outside at the confines of your infrastructure or your network, and make sure bad stuff doesn't even get into it for the very first time. That's the main use case for curation. And this is the last thing that I'd be showing in today's call, which is the catalog. So in catalog, there are certain libraries such as typo squatting. Again, typo squatting is a type, but let me find an example. Let me find course, for example, right? This is a comprehensive research tool, and it integrates with OpenSSS. So if you're a developer advocate, or if you're from the Center of Excellence team, for example, a library like HTTP client, you can get them from like 10, 20, or even 30 different sources. The multiple major companies have libraries that pretty much do the same thing as a HTTP client. So you can compare between them. This has an option to switch between versions and zoom into them and look at them. And you can look at their OpenSSL score. So in this case, its workflow is good, no vulnerabilities, licenses are good, artifacts are good, dependencies may be sketchy, but their code review process is horrible. They have a score of 1 out of 10. It's not well maintained. Their security policy is horrible, and all of these other things that it's scored on. Based on all of these things, it gets a score of 4 out of 10. So if you're a developer, if you're a manager, or your team is writing code and you want your development team to choose the best possible library, this is the perfect tool to have. And this is catalog. So yeah, that kind of concludes the list of things that I wanted to show today. We covered pretty much all of these things in the slide, which summarizes everything that we spoke about. And curation and catalog does these things, blocking packages before entering for the first time, especially the first time when something runs, it can end up doing bad, nasty stuff like installing malware. So that can be prevented by curation. Having an audit trail, having automated policies, having filters of various types, and a comprehensive UI-based research tool. Yep. And we'll spend some time for Q&A if you have any. And I think I'm giving it back to the webinar organizers to see there's some fun stuff, gift cards and stuff. So back to you, Richard.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sam, Roshan, and Lawrence. Some amazing material. Hopefully everyone was able to follow along. We are going to be sending out an email after this event. That'll include a badge indicating that you've taken this webinar around security. We'll also be emailing you details on the $30 gift card that you'll be getting. This is, again, part 2 of our 4-part workshop series. So we are also going to send out some details on how to register for our distribution course in a couple weeks. So definitely look forward to that as well. We'll be bringing in some other solution engineers. Want to thank everyone for joining us today. And please email us with any additional questions that you have or additional help that you need. We are also extending the trial licenses, so the environment that you have today hopefully will help you use that to the rest of the year. Again, email us if you need any help with it. And we want to thank you for your time today and sticking with us for this event. So again, please email us any questions. And with that, I think we can wrap it up. So thank you, everyone. Hope to see you in a couple weeks on the distribution course. Again, part 3 of the 4-part workshop series. Thanks you again. Bye, everyone.
Thank you all.